Welcome back to Drawing Because We Have to, because if we don't, we slowly lose our minds. Hope all of you guys are doing okay today. Hope things are going well. I'm going to resume working on this weird deer thing that certainly gives me Princess Mononoke vibes. I haven't seen that movie in forever, but I definitely think that I might have to go see it again after working on this. So I was thinking about this drawing in particular and some of the other ones that I've just been randomly creating. Just to very quickly review from last time, I just made a whole bunch of random marks on this page, and that's what got me to this point. I've just slowly been turning those marks into things, and I don't really have much of a plan. You might be looking at this and be like, yeah, I can tell you didn't have much of a plan. Look at this thing. But I think there's a benefit to doing that. I think there's a benefit to working without a plan in the same way that I think there's a benefit to working from a plan. But sometimes coming up with ideas can be kind of difficult. And this manner of drawing can sometimes be of benefit to those who struggle to come up with ideas. Because it kind of just pushes you to let the lines and your mood and what you're thinking about dictate the kind of things that you make. And I don't think that that's particularly a bad thing. I think that there's some benefit to that. This house thing now looks like it's built onto the back of this creature, which was not my intent, but we'll see what happens when we go with it. Maybe? I don't know. But coming up with ideas can sometimes be difficult. I tend to pull less from inspiration and more from just the random thoughts that cascade through my brain. And I don't know why, but there always seems to be a large quantity of thoughts just cascading through my brain. At the beginning of my classes when I was teaching, I would often come up with these warm-ups that would just be bizarre ideas. I would come up with... At one point, I came up with ideas way in advance, and they were like device of the week, or instrument of the week, creature of the week, character of the week, and I would sit there and just fill in these ideas. Character of the week. It's going to be a superhero who uses balloons as their mechanism to fight crime. And maybe the creature of the week was going to be a creature that won a beauty contest for the entire galaxy for the most beautiful creature. And the device of the week might be a weather-producing machine. And I would just come up with ideas like that. And those would be the warm-ups for the day that the students would work on. And I think that maybe creating ideas like that is just not particularly difficult for me. I also think that I don't rule things out. I don't tend to think of an idea and then shoot it down and be like, no, that's a dumb idea. That's a stupid idea. I tend to just let my ideas flow, and I know that some are going to be better than others and some are going to be worse than others. But I don't really care. I try to give them each a little bit of time to be what they're going to be. You just never know if that random idea is going to end up being something that's fun down the line, and so I try to give all of them a little bit of my attention, a little bit of time. Of course, this means that I do waste time sometimes when I'm coming up with ideas. I've got lots and lots of sketchbooks full of things that have probably no link to anything. They probably won't amount to anything, and I'm okay with that. I think maybe that's part of the trick, is just learning how to be okay with wasting some time. And perhaps even the notion of wasting time artistically is kind of a weird one. What are you really wasting? If you're spending time doing something that you enjoy, obviously it's hard to say that that's wasted time. Uh-oh, which way is this chain gonna go? Can I reverse that? Is that gonna work? Is that gonna throw off the perspective? Yeah, that looks like it threw it off a little bit. Oh well. We'll reverse this one again, I guess. But again, like, what exactly is being wasted? If you're creating for a class, creating for progress, creating for the joy of creating, and you enjoyed what it was you created, you got the grade, you accomplished what you needed to with the time that you invested, then is it really wasted? It's harder to say those kind of things when it comes to art, I think. Often we don't have really well developed goals as far as what our time invested into our artwork is supposed to achieve. And I think, we'll move this down just a little bit. I think that if you don't have clear goals, it's really hard. It's kind of hard to fail in a way, because if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, how can you be certain that you didn't achieve it? And in the same breath, if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, it's going to be impossible to achieve it. So if you're the kind of personality who can work without goals, who can just meander through things and enjoy it, then wonderful. But if you're the kind of person that you're going to get to the end of a portion of time spent on your work and you haven't gotten any closer to your goal because your goal is not very well defined, then that might be something that you need to consider and something you need to work on in another capacity. You might need to put some time into kind of figuring out what it is that you want. But coming up with ideas is something that I think can be very easily linked to not marrying yourself to the concept that each idea needs to be purposeful or needs to be perfect. It's very much okay for a project, for a time that for a sketch, for an idea, to just be an infant. It needs some time to play, to figure out what it wants to be when it grows up. And sometimes we can put a little bit of undue pressure on our ideas to be something that they're not, or something that they're not yet. So try to give your ideas time to grow, time to ferment, time to become something, and try not to demand that they become something faster than they would naturally. I found that for some of my students over the years, that they had a really easy time coming up with ideas for projects when there was a little bit of structure, and it was very difficult for them to come up with ideas when they had no structure, when they were able to do everything they wanted, which is ironic because most of the time my students would usually semi-sarcastically complain about the projects because, you hear comments like, oh, but I just want to do what I want to do. But ironically, anytime I gave the students the ability to just do what they wanted to do, inevitably a large percentage of them would just stop and wouldn't have the ability to formulate an idea on their own. And I think it's just the fact that a little bit of structure is necessary. We as humans are so used to having it, and it's actually comfortable in a way. We need some semblance of direction. And so a project gives you some semblance of a direction. It gives you a place to aim. It points you in a particular direction. And I think that if you are struggling to come up with ideas, that maybe artificially creating some of that structure can be really beneficial for you. There used to be art challenges that a buddy of mine and myself would take part in. More so him. I helped him with things, but at that point in time, I had unfortunately painted myself into a corner as far as what I was as an artist, and had just kind of come to terms with the fact that I was not going to be particularly good, and so my time was likely going to be spent editing and helping other people do their artwork, and because I was just going to be incapable. And we could talk about that at another date. That's not where my view has stayed, but there was a time period in my life where I had resigned myself to the fact that I was not going to be capable of being an artist. And so I figured, well, I can at least, be like an editor and, kind of a coach for other people doing it. But anyway, there were these weekly drawings on conceptart.org, which I don't believe exists anymore. And there would be creature of the week and character of the week and things. One of the places that I actually got the concept for my daily and weekly warm-ups when I was teaching was from conceptart.org. And the nice part about these challenges is that they gave you a prompt. And so you would get an idea probably on Monday, I think, is when they came out. And it eliminated that, oh man, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do this week? Because you had it defined. And there was a little bit of friendly competition too. Other artists were entering things. And stuff like that is really nice and beneficial. I don't know if a lot of things like that still exist. If there are things that you listening have run into that is similar, please list them in the comments, because I'd love to hear about them, maybe take part in them. And at the very least be able to point some of my now graduated students or friends and former colleagues to those kinds of things as well. So yeah, if you know any of them, please feel free to leave that in a comment. Comments down below. But having some of that structure can sometimes help with ideating, with coming up with ideas. I think that might be one of my favorite things to do artistically, is just to come up with ideas. I love just sitting around and formulating ideas. I struggle with the actual execution often, the sitting down and actually making the things. I talked about that recently in my second podcast episode on motivation, if you wanted to check that out. But one of my biggest struggles is that I have a tendency to get overexcited and I over prep and I put all of these extreme expectations on myself. And the second I get out of the ideating phase, the second I get into the phase of like, hey, let's actually do a thing, then I get scared. And I often will stop at that point, which is terrifyingly sad, because when you've put in all the time to create these ideas and these concepts, and then you don't do anything with it, what a bummer. What a bummer. And in my particular case, it makes me kind of sit there and go, well, what's the point? What's the point of all this ideating and coming up with these cool things if I'm not actually gonna do anything with them? That's one of the reasons why this particular sketchbook session and last session as well are built like this, where I don't have an idea. I have no or very little expectation of myself. I'm just drawing. I don't have the secret. I wish I did. I don't have the secret to solving that problem. I will keep working on it, and I will, if I find some magical concoction of concepts, ideas, metaphors, psychology, and pizza, I will let you guys know, because I'm sure that there are others among us who would love the ability to work through that. But the coming up with ideas is one of my favorite parts. I enjoy just sitting down and developing ideas. And I'm getting more confident and better at the actual execution of them as well. But it can be really beneficial and easier to do these things if you have adequate support. I would imagine that most of you listening probably started drawing or painting or whatever art form it is that you pursue when you were young, when you were in middle school, high school, maybe even younger. I think actually probably some of you listening are younger than that. And it's funny because it seems like at a very young age we have a lot of support from our parents. Parents get really excited about hanging our stuff on the walls when we're little. And they hang it on the wall, they hang it on the fridge, they brag about it. And then ironically, like the older we get, the more it's almost this trepidation about, oh my goodness, is my kid going to actually do anything with their life? Or are they going to continue just to draw and, achieve nothing? I hope that it's changing a little bit. My interactions with students in the last decade have pointed to the fact that a lot of parents seem to be, I want to say, coming to terms with the fact that like their kids are going to be artists sometimes, but that again has a more negative connotation to it. But it seems like there's a lot of parents who are understanding that their kid being an artist is not a death sentence for their career and their livelihood. They're not going to end up being unable to pay all their bills because they're artistic. There are still a lot of people who think that. Still a lot of people who think that your art's never going to amount to anything, or that art in general doesn't amount to anything, that it's a pointless endeavor. And that was really, really prominent when I was growing up. But I just find it ironic that parents can be so supportive of their kids' artwork when they're really little, and then as they get older, there's almost a fear that their kid is going to decide they want to be an artist. So I think most kids kind of want these extravagant, crazy things. Most kids, when you talk to them, they want to be astronauts or firefighters or things like that. Though it seems like more frequently you have a lot who want to be actors and musicians and YouTube stars, which, oh man, I don't really know what to do with that. But at least when I was young, kids had aspirations of doing these crazy things, being the president of the United States or the president of a different country, being politicians, being a rock star, all these kinds of things. And we're totally fine with kids being like that when they're little. And then there comes a day when it's like, okay, it's time to crush some dreams. It's time to tell these youngins how the real world works, that they can't actually follow their dreams, that they can't actually do what it is that we've, whether consciously or unconsciously, been encouraging them toward for the last 10 or 15 years. And that part in particular seems pretty criminal. Seems very unkind to teach kids that they can be whatever they want when they're really little, and then to stray from that as they get older. But also, I don't know what the alternative would be, because you don't want to start when a kid's 3 or 4 and tell them, I'm sorry, like, you're probably not going to be able to play basketball professionally. You're not tall enough. Like, your genes just don't have it in them. You don't really want to crush a 4-year-old's dreams. And then you also don't want to encourage a 17-year-old that will never be able to do a thing that they can do it, that they can do anything that they put their mind to. Like most things in life, there's kind of this weird halfway, this weird middle ground that we have to find, and it's very elusive and it's very difficult to find. Reality can sometimes be cruel, unfortunately. And people that want to do things can't actually achieve those goals. And that's hard too. I'm not sure precisely where my opinion lies as far as those kinds of things. Because there are certain skills, like drawing or painting, math, certain scientific skills that can be learned. And they might be a bigger struggle for some people to learn, but they can still be learned. And there are other things, like sometimes the way you're born is just gonna not make you able to run track, or not gonna make you able to play basketball professionally. And that feels unfair, and maybe it is, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter if it's unfair or not, because it's just the way of things. It's the way of the world, the way of the universe. And screaming about how unfair something like that is not going to benefit you. But returning to the support idea, we get a lot of support when we're really little from our parents and the authority figures in our lives, from people that we value and we value their opinions. But it can be hard to get that support artistically sometimes, especially the older you get. In my experience, a lot of parents about 8th grade through 10th grade start to make the shift toward, okay, like, yeah, you did a lot of art when you were little, but that was just play, and now it's time for real life. And fortunately, there has been a little bit of a shift, and I've seen a lot of really supportive parents in the last like 5 years. Parents realizing that there are careers in art, there is a future in art, and it's not just teaching. Your kid could go into graphic design, your kid could work for, some companies building layouts and designs, could be designing book covers, could be working on, the really adventurous parents kind of get to the idea of like, well, my kid might be able to work in animation or, do something for a cartoon. So you do have some growth there, and that's really nice, really beneficial. But I feel like we're still behind the times. We're still trying to catch up. And it's probably partially due to the fact that the art jobs and professions are harder to track, and that parents naturally are from a different generation than their kids. And so for them to try to process how the world has shifted is always difficult. It's difficult to realize that you're getting older, and most people don't want to recognize that. You hear so many people that fight against the idea of like, no, I'm not going to be 40. I'm just going to be 39 forever. And we're afraid, a lot of us, of getting old. I suppose my philosophy on that is why fear that which cannot be changed, which is easier said than done, but I don't want to give any extra energy to getting older and to feeling sad about it or fear about it, because I can't do anything to prevent it. All I can do is make sure I keep my body as healthy as possible and make sure I keep my mind exercising so it doesn't start to go early. I'm not afraid of getting older. It's also, like, unfortunately unfair in that as a guy, when you get older, your beard goes gray and your hair goes gray and maybe you go bald, but it's okay. But society is a lot harsher on girls and women as they age. It's not really fair. I don't really know if that's one of those universal things or if that's a societal component. I do not know. My parents were relatively supportive of my artwork. My dad is the reason that I got my graphic design degree, and that was a mix of being supportive and unsupportive. I wanted to go into animation and was young and had no idea what that meant, and it probably would have meant moving away, and it probably would have meant a lot more work than I was willing to put in at 18 or 19. And he tried to help with that. He tried to take me to meet professional animators and figure out what I would need to do in order to do that, and I'm really thankful that he did that for me. And when I decided to go to the state school that was maybe 20 or 30 minutes away from my parents' house, so I could still live there, because I was, as I am now, very frugal and very money conscious. I didn't want to spend the extra money living in dorms. And now, which I regret, because everyone I've talked to that lived in dorms has some really awesome friendships and stories to talk about. Not least of all, my wife, who had a great time living in the dorms, by and large. But so I was going to the state school, and my father, when we were talking about what my degree was going to be, I think at that point I was going to go into computer science and drawing, because I didn't know what I was doing. And I did actually like a little bit of programming at that point. And so he convinced me to do a graphic design degree, because it was from his perspective, I think, and he's probably not wrong, the degree that had the highest likelihood of actually getting a job when I got out of university. Eventually, I added on the art education degree, and then I had 2 very practical degrees. So, in a kind of an odd situation, because in one stroke, he was not encouraging for me to actually go into art and follow it. On the other hand, he was very practical and didn't try to persuade me to get out of art. He just wanted me to make sure that if I got an art degree, it would in fact be one that was useful. And to be fair, it was. I taught with my teaching license and my art education degree for 11 years. And so that was useful. The graphic design degree has mostly just been a series of skills that I've used over the years for logo designs, for some work at the school that I was at here and there, helping friends with things, stuff like that. That degree didn't matter so much as a degree as it mattered in that I had hundreds, if not thousands, of hours in the studio and learning how to design. Most of which was just self-learned. You can get a little bit more about my thoughts on whether you should go to art school or not if you check out that video, which I can link in the description below. I did just a quick run through, not a very long video, on whether you should go to art school or not. And it's really talking about the kind of art schools that I went to, which is a state school, which I think for most people is probably the most accessible and more likely that that's what you're going to go to if you go to art school. If you're able to go to something like Art Center or Savannah College of Art and Design or something along those lines, that's quite a different thing. And as much as I would love to give you feedback on those, I did not go to those kind of schools, so I can't give you a whole lot. I could pretend, but that doesn't seem hardly fair. But Dad was supportive in some ways and unsupportive in others. And I frankly don't remember what my mom said. I have to think about this for just a second. Yeah, I mean, we're talking like 17 years ago that I was looking into going to university. And so I don't really remember if my mom must have been okay with it, because I'd like to think I would remember her being discouraging if that's what occurred. So Mom must have been somewhat okay with me going to art school. She was a flautist growing up, and so I think there might have been a little bit of her enjoying the fact that I was doing artistic things as well. She went into accounting till I was born. And then she stayed home. And my father was an Air Force pilot who flew reconnaissance, which is its own interesting can of worms. Not sure what these circles would be, but I want to make sure that I leave myself some areas that aren't defined in the background, so I don't end up with these gigantic fields of black. So I'll leave myself these, I guess it'll actually be dark green. I'll leave myself some holes to create things in, whether it's going to be eyes or lights or falling leaves or whatever. I don't want to have these giant blankets of a single tone and a single color. So I'll just create these so that happens. In fact, I'm going to come down here, I think, and create some more falling leaves while I'm thinking about it. So what do you do if you don't have any parental support? That's a tough place to be. It's a tough thing if you feel like you're having to hide your art and hide your desires to do certain things from your parents or people in your life that you want to appease. I feel like being an artist or a musician has such a stigma in our society that it's always going to have just these little snippets of like, oh, are you sure you don't want to be an accountant? Are you sure you don't want to do something that could be a little bit more reliable? It's changing, but I think it's changing slowly. And I think the situation with the AI art has created some more questions or some new questions or rehashed some old questions about the reliability of art as a career. I'm not particularly equipped to have that conversation. There's lots of lovely content online if you want to go find those things. I think Steven Zapata is still one of the best ones to go talk or to go listen to about that. But although Adam Duff has had some interesting things to say recently about it that have, I wasn't quite sure how to take at first. And evidently, judging from the comment section on those videos, some other people were also not 100% sure how to take it. But not having that support makes life difficult. I'm trying to think and trying to remember if I had any peers in college that were also in that position where they didn't have a lot of support from their parents or their family. Most of the students that I went to school with had reasonable quantities of support. The ones that really didn't had to find a way to pay for everything on their own. And so they were usually very busy and were working very hard. Sorry about that. I am just down here creating some more leaves, kind of on the lower portions, because I'm going to forget if I don't do it right now. So I wanted to make sure I'm getting these in so that at the very least the shapes exist and I can turn them into other things later on if I'd like to. This is one of those amazing things about digital art is if I was doing this digitally right now, this would be such an easy thing to just, I'm going to just create a new layer and do that on top. But alas, here we are, working traditionally. I think if you don't have a lot of support, it forces you earlier to make the assessment about if this is really what you want to do. And it makes you be a little bit more stubborn. The problem is that there are some people who probably would be very good artists and who would have really enjoyed that lifestyle who don't do it because they don't have the support and they're not quite confident, strong enough, whatever the word might be, when they're young to go against their parents' wishes or the wishes of the people around them and actually pursue what they want to pursue. And that is sad. I've encountered that a lot with students. Not when I was in school so much, but I'm going to move the microphone. Not as much when I was in school, but a lot with my students, where I would eventually have students who turned away from what they wanted to do because it's not what their parents wanted for them to do. And you see that a lot even now with kids going to university for a degree that they don't want because it'll make mommy and daddy happy. So if you want to be an artist and you don't have the support, then it just puts you in a position that's kind of a crappy one to encounter when you're young. Which is, do you go against your parents' advice? Do you go against your parents' will and desires for you because it's what you think is going to be best for you? And inevitably, you're going to have to do that at some point in your life, just because at some point you're going to probably be independent from your parents. But I don't think that most American kids are ready for that at 16, 17, 18 when they have to start making the decisions about what they're going to do for school and what they're going to do for their career. And so that makes it really hard. So if you don't have a lot of support for your artistic ventures, I am sorry. That's very tough. It's a very tough place to be. I would encourage you to keep creating things. Maybe try to find secret places in your life that you're capable of continuing to do the things that you love. It's not necessary for everybody who likes drawing or painting or likes doing things that are artistic to do it as a career. We all need things that give us downtime and help us relax in the evenings, and there's no reason why art can't be that for you. If you have aspirations of doing it professionally, maybe just start pursuing those things really slowly. Start slowly increasing your skill, slowly increasing the quantity of time you're putting into things. At a certain point in your life, what other people want from you and what their expectations of you are going to matter to you less than going to sleep at night and being okay with the decisions you made. But it can be hard when you're young to try to contemplate how that's all going to pan out. Just makes me think about so many just odd little regrets I have of, man, I should have put more time into that, or I should have done this differently. Every once in a while, still, I hear people talk about how they have no regrets, and I just cannot fathom that. But the thing is, too, don't let yourself be controlled by them. Like, I have regrets about the fact that I didn't put more time into my art when I was younger. What am I doing right now? I'm making art. I'm taking the time that I have to do this. I'm hoping and praying that there's people listening right now who this is going to be beneficial for, that are going to either sit down and draw with me and create some things that bring them some joy, or who maybe, just maybe, will take some of my words and be encouraged by them. That's the hope here. That's the hope. Because I know that there are a lot of us out here that have the desire to bring things to life, to create. And the world is an exceptionally boring place if we choose not to. So whether you have good support in your artistic endeavors or not, please keep creating things. Create things and share them with people in your life. And if you don't have a lot of people in your life who are particularly supportive, maybe consider, joining some online communities and sharing some things. Start a YouTube channel and just start posting speed paints and things like that. If nothing else, it can be kind of encouraging and beneficial to you just to have the consistency of like, well, I'm going to just try to upload one piece a week. And even if you don't have a whole lot of subscribers or followers, it's just something that allows you to be held accountable and you keep making things. I think very few of us are going to get to a point in our life where we sit there and go, you know what? Like, I'm so bummed that I put so much time into my art. I probably will at some point sit there and go like, I'm bummed that I put this much time into video games. But I don't think that I will ever hit a point in my life where I will be disappointed about the quantity of time that I put into my artwork. I mean, I guess unless you were putting in so much time, you were like neglecting your family and your kid and stuff. But I can't show this right now, but my daughter has an easel in this room. She's not quite 4 yet, so she doesn't, sit down for long artistic sessions, but she has an easel in here, and that was always my intent, was to have my studio not be this secret place where Dad runs away, but to have it be a place where this is where things are created. And I have my desk in here, and you have your desk in here, and if you want to come in and you want to create things, that is fine. You are free to do so. I guess in essence, I want the art studio in this house to be less of my art studio and more of this is the art studio. And so if you want to come and you want to work on your projects in here, that is totally fine. Daddy's going to sit over on his desk and have his headphones on. If you want to sit there and you want to put your headphones on, she has these super cute little like pink wireless headphones for when we go on plane flights and things. You can put your headphones on and we'll just sit here and we'll work. And sometimes we'll work and we'll chat. And sometimes, you'll tell me to be quiet because you're trying to concentrate on something. So I want her to grow up understanding that the studio is a place for creating things and that she can be a part of it if she wants to be. I also don't force her to draw or paint or anything like that, obviously, because she's young. But even as she gets older, I'm not, if she decides she wants to do nothing but math, like, that's fine. My job is not to make her a mini me. My job is to create a scenario where she can be the human she needs to be. I think about these parental support things a lot because as my kid grows up, I'm trying to look at the good things my parents did and replicate them, and look at the things that I didn't like that they did and get rid of those. And which is not to harp on my parents, but nobody's perfect. And I'm a weirdo and was probably difficult to predict and understand as a kid. Maybe some of you are weirdos too, and your parents are lovely human beings who meant well and just had no concept of how to deal with their weird art kid. Some parents are not supportive because they're bad at being parents. Some parents are not supportive because they don't know how to be. The world is seldom super black and white. I think it is sometimes, but a lot of times there's more nuance. Been thinking a lot about art school in the last couple of days. Probably partially because I had coffee yesterday morning with a good friend that I actually went to art school with, and it's just interesting, like reminiscing on some of these things. There were parts of it that were really, really fun, and there were parts of it that were so annoying. I think the most annoying part was having been in AP Studio Art in high school. Probably thought more highly about my skill than I should have. Arrogance was certainly a struggle of mine growing up. Maybe it still is. But I had all these teachers that in my first couple of freshman courses that felt ill-equipped to be doing the jobs they were doing. They seemed like their skill wasn't particularly high, or they didn't quite know what they were talking about. They often seemed to favor things that were more abstract and less realistic, which in my arrogance I assumed was because they were just unskilled and didn't know how to make realistic things, and therefore they had to make themselves feel better by harping on that which was better than what they could do. Maybe there's some truth to that, but I think a lot of that was just my arrogance and trying to understand why this wasn't going as well as I thought it should. But I realized later what part of the reason was for all this, though, and it was the fact that most of the teachers that I had my freshman year were grad students. So they were people that were working on getting their master's in drawing or painting or printmaking or something like that. And they had no teaching experience and didn't really know what they were doing. And often, somebody who was getting their master's in like drawing might teach a painting class just because they needed the classes filled. And so a lot of times these people just had no idea how to do what they were tasked with doing. And, they're not going to tell the students that because that would be super embarrassing and it would make the university look really dumb. But I think that was the reality, is that a lot of these people they were not equipped to do the job that they were tasked with doing. And I couldn't tell exactly what the problem was, but I could tell that there was a problem. I could tell that there was an issue because these teachers felt like they were, rather inept. And not all my teachers were. I had a couple teachers my freshman year that were fantastic. one that ran the printmaking program was an awesome painting teacher. He was actually a really good painter too. So it wasn't just that he taught the printmaking classes and like the master students was just had to be there for this. He actually was quite an accomplished painter as well. And I think I learned more from painting in that, more about painting in that single semester than I did in any of the other painting courses that I took from presumably better painters as my more advanced classes. But more of my advanced classes, the the painting teachers really just cared about making their own paintings. Or I had one professor that literally, like, if you put purple into your painting, he would grade you better. And the first time I did it, he actually asked me, he's like, did somebody tell you that like purple's my favorite color and that I give better grades if you put purple in it? And I was really taken aback and thought he was joking. I was like, no. And he's like, well, because it's true. And sure enough, like I got a better grade on that painting than the painting prior because it had purple in it. So, I mean, that class was just weird in that I was under the assumption we were here to learn how to paint. I don't think he ever instructed us either once. That was a whole semester that I had this guy, and he was a good painter, real good painter. I've been to some of his shows. Yeah, he used to do quite realistic stuff, and then as he got older, as many art professors do, he shifted to more abstract and non-representational. I think it happens because they get kind of sick of focusing on a single thing, and that I totally understand. But I don't think he instructed us once. I think literally the first day we walked in there, he had a bunch of football pads set up, and we painted those football pads in oil paint. And many of us had never even used oil paint before. I was certainly in that camp. And so I literally didn't know what I was doing with the medium. And that painting turned out okay. But I think I just kept asking questions like, what do I do here? What do I do here? What do I do here? And he didn't really even want to answer my questions. He kind of wanted to just let me figure it out on my own. And I don't know if that was his teaching technique, if he didn't know how to teach. I do not know. I do know that that class counted for a credit that got me through my college degree, and that's about what I got from it. And, you know, hundreds of hours of practice. But did I have to spend the money and sit through the class to have those hundreds of hours of practice? I don't think so. Maybe at that age I did because I was pretty undisciplined. But thinking about that class was, and that I think that class was in my junior year too, so that wasn't an early class. Maybe the weirdest part about art school that I didn't anticipate class-wise was the art history classes. I had to take 3 base level art history classes, like essentially freshman art history. And they covered the vast majority of the world's art. And so we had to move really fast. So I think we started with like prehistory, which makes a lot of sense. So you're starting with cave paintings and things like in Lascaux, France, and fertility goddesses, little clay sculptures and ceramic sculptures from way back in the day. And basically those classes were a series of slides. The teacher would talk about the slide a little bit, and we would be tested on our knowledge later on based on if we could recall the name of the piece, where it was made, when it was made, what it was made of. And that was pretty much the exam, which felt really odd to me. And this is why. Because we spent all this time learning about the pieces, learning about their history, their significance, things like that. And the test didn't have any of those components. The test was just, can you name it? What year was it made? What's it made of? And that felt so disconnected because we had these long classes, and wasn't really discussions at that point. It was just lecture. We had these long lectures on the significance of these pieces, and yet none of the significance was required for us to remember. So, as you might expect, I think I left a link out there. Oh well. As you might expect, I retain almost nothing from those classes because I would just memorize the content for the test, get a decent grade on the test, and then forget everything the next day. It's a bad way to teach. The exams could have easily been essay questions on the significance of pieces of artwork or comparing two pieces of artwork in some way. There's a lot of ways to do that, and that was a poor way of doing it. It was probably the way they'd been taught, probably the way the class had been managed, and it's also just a really easy way to manage it, because that's really, really easy to grade. It's not difficult to grade multiple choice things like that. You can just literally check and see if people got all of the questions and numbers and things correct. Very easy to grade, and that's probably the reason that method was chosen. Because the best method would have likely been essay questions or essays, and those are hard to grade. They take a lot of time, and if you're a university professor, you don't want to waste your time, which is sad to think that helping your students actually retain knowledge is a waste of time. But there was certainly a bit of that feeling as I progressed through my classes. Now, nobody discussed anything. Nobody really asked questions in those classes. It was pretty much entirely lecture. When I got up to my senior level art history classes, I think I just finally got bored enough, and I had a good friend in that class who helped me come to the conclusion that we could ask questions, if we didn't understand something or we found something interesting and wanted to compare it. And so all of a sudden I started asking questions and raising my hand in my junior and senior art history courses, and just, trying to engage the professor a little bit. And that professor was so excited to have somebody that was actually engaging with them on the material. And I came to the conclusion that maybe part of the reason these art history classes were so boring is that the teachers, nobody interacted with them. And so they lectured because nobody raised their hand. Nobody discussed anything. Nobody asked any questions. Everybody knew that they were basically just there for the notes, and then they were going to get the grade, and that's what this class was for. So the second that we started having some semblance of a discussion in the class, it was way more fun, way more enjoyable. And I tried to keep that in mind when I started teaching. Thinking about how can I make these discussions and lectures more entertaining, because the ones that I had to endure were terrible. Did I always succeed? No, absolutely not. No, I did plenty of stupid things. I think I was a pretty decent teacher by the time I stopped teaching in the school, but I wasn't always a great teacher. It took a while. It took a while to figure things out. On one occasion, I went into, it might have been the first time I taught kindergarten, and I started writing on the board and then asked the kids, to read it, or just assumed they could. And sure enough, kindergartners can't read by and large. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, this is going to be a really quick backpedaling and figuring out how to do this lesson, because you guys can't read. So I'm going to have to explain and walk through everything. But those kind of challenges were really good for my humility, and they were also really good for forcing me to be malleable and adaptable, because you just don't have a choice. You've got 30, 5 and 6 year olds in your room. You're gonna come up with a new plan, and you're gonna come up with it fast, because if you don't, your life is gonna be miserable. So yeah, there's a lot of funny things like that you learn. One of the cool parts about the art education degree, though, was I got to take some really fun classes that I never probably would have otherwise. Metalsmithing was one of them, and I really had a blast in metalsmithing. Learning how to make things out of sheet metal, and learning how to rivet, learning how to make all these different kinds of welds. It was very exciting. And that was a class that I had good instruction in. That teacher was kind of goofy, kind of weird. I often felt judged in that class, ironically. But that class was she did a really good job of teaching us. She was the head of the metalsmithing department. She really knew her stuff and was really quite accomplished. But she also did a pretty decent job of walking us through things and instructing us. Very much appreciate how that was handled. So Need to shift over to pen for a minute. Let some of the pen brush dry. I'm probably going to start like smearing things on my hand here soon on accident. Well, maybe we ought to shift to the bottom of this for a minute and let the top portion dry, which is great because I have no idea what I'm doing on the bottom. So let's just start working. But yeah, there were some really spectacular teachers, and that instructor was one of them. Photography I took as well, and photography was really hard for me. I kind of am a designer by nature, which means that I like things symmetrical and I like things parallel, and I like to do all these things when I take photographs that my that my photography instructor could tell. I think he took a look at my first batch of photos and was like, "You're a designer, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, this is gonna be hard for you." I'm like, "Well, cool, thank you." I'm already like nervous about this class because I know nothing about photography, and frankly, the opinions I had of photography were really antiquated and presumptuous. I often looked at it when I was a kid as like, this is low class art because, it's not nearly as hard to take a photo as it is to, make a painting. And so therefore it's a lesser art form. And obviously, like, it takes less time to actually capture the photo that you're trying to capture than it does to make a painting. But saying that it's a lesser art form was just young me being really arrogant. So I went into it with a not great attitude, found out I wasn't good at it after the fact. Maybe the two are linked. And that class was hard. I think I got a B in that class, and that was a hard-fought B. Really wish I would have taken a printmaking class. Never did. I took ceramics, and I was absolutely terrible at it, and the instructor was terrible too. And I actually had a roommate come in after hours, and he would help me build things and teach me how to build things. What other classes? Some of the drawing classes were really fun. My intro to graphic design was a blast. The non-art classes were exactly what, high school was. None of them were particularly advanced. And so they felt pretty much just like an extension of high school classes. I don't think I'm going to start talking about the education classes because that's probably a video entirely on its own and probably needs to be a pretty scripted one because I might have had the best art education professor that the school offered. He was fantastic and is probably the only reason that I developed into a halfway decent teacher because he was just wonderful. And I talked to other kids who were going through education programs, and none of them were as fond of their instructor as the art kids were of theirs. But he was a wonderful, wonderful human being. And we learned so much from him. So that'll probably be, at some point I'll probably do a video on art education in general and things to look out for, things to do, things to not do. All the general stuff that you would hopefully try to help somebody who's maybe thinking about doing that with their life. But I had to take a lot of studio classes, and most of them were pretty entertaining. Some were, like I've mentioned, a little bit different or strange, but most are all right. Metalsmithing was fun. I've still got some stuff floating around. I made some things for my mother. I made some things for my mother-in-law. I don't think I was married yet at that point, but I must have been dating my wife. I got married before I finished at college. The last year I was in classes, I was actually married, which is pretty young. Don't be in a hurry to get married. It worked out really well for me. I've seen many other people that it did not work out very well for. So Just don't pressure yourself in that category. It's not a good thing to artificially create pressure for yourself, especially when it comes to romance, which is one of the more awkward and difficult things to fabricate, and definitely something I don't want to talk about today. I'm just not, like, even if I was going to talk about it for any amount of time, like, I'm not the person you want advice from on that. Not at all. I met a lot of really cool people at art school, though. And that's one of the pieces that's hard to debate and something that I still think about. And in fact, when I've had students who've just asked me point blank whether they should go to art school or not, the answer has kind of been, like, if money's not an issue, just go. You know, because growing up a little bit, the maturity of a couple years in school will be beneficial for you. You'll be in a better spot to work the job that you want to professionally. And also, you're going to meet people. And if you go to a really good art school, you're going to be networked with people that you're going to then potentially get jobs with later on. And that's a really good thing, a really beneficial thing. But even if that wasn't the case, you're going to make friends. And there are certain parts of adulthood that are more difficult than others. And I think developing long-term solid friendships is one of them. I hear from people pretty regularly that are trying to make friends, trying to, whether, romantic or otherwise, trying to forge new relationships. And it's more difficult the older you get. When you're in school, there's a common ground. Everyone's there for a similar purpose. And then, once you get a little older, it's not quite as defined, and it can be much, much, much harder to meet people. Make friends. Anytime you have the opportunity to make some friends, make friends. I don't have a ton of friends from high school and middle school and college that I still talk to, but I do have a couple, and it's really good. Really good to have friends from back in the days. Friends that have continuity with you and have memories of the same things you do, trying to beat the same bosses in old video games, whatever it might be. Speaking of video games, the Tears of the Kingdom, which is the sequel to Zelda Breath of the Wild, is coming out very soon, and I am so excited. So excited. Every day on YouTube I keep seeing updates. They're like, there's 30 days left or 31 days left. So if you're listening to this video later, you'll be able to track exactly when it was recorded. But I am so excited. I am going to get ahead on all of my work and then take probably a full day and just play it when it comes out. Something that I would have thought was really silly and foolish years ago. But I had a colleague a while back that would take their birthday off every year, and I thought that was so silly and immature. And I look at that now and I go, you know what? No, life is short, and an excuse to have a little bit of extra joy is not a bad thing. You can always work more, but you can't have more time with your loved ones. You can't have more time to conjure joy. Like, it's not that easy. Life is hard. And if you can take a day off so you can play your favorite video game when it comes out, I think that you ought to. There's no way my parents ever would have let me do that in high school. But to be fair, when Halo 2 came out, my best friend and I either we ditched class or we had an off block, and we went and we got it the day it came out at opening, and we went home and we played for several hours, and it was wonderful. It was so much fun. So maybe I have done those kind of things for a long time, and I just don't. I'm literally just remembering it like as I'm speaking right now. But life is short. Like, have fun. Have fun. You know, don't mess with other people and make other people's lives miserable because you're having fun. But have fun. Do things that are, you know, a little risky or that you're a little afraid of doing, and just, you know, enjoy yourself. There's been a couple moments where I was like, man, I love watching all these like Zelda YouTubers, but I have no idea how I would ever get into something like that if I wanted to. But I will probably just be talking about it loads on here as I'm doing my sketchbook sessions. I'll probably be talking about all the new game features and things like that. And hopefully I won't, you know, agitate you guys too much. Hopefully you guys will go get it and play it too, because then we can talk in the comments about Zelda, which sounds lovely for all parties involved. All parties involved. What a wonderful game. I started the Zelda series with Ocarina of Time, and I definitely, I think that Breath of the Wild is not just my favorite Zelda game. I think it's probably one of my favorite games ever. Though I think, if I'm being totally honest, I've only played 2 Zelda games. So I can't really call myself that huge of a Zelda fan, can I? Because I played Ocarina of Time. I never played Majora's Mask because I couldn't afford it. Same with Twilight Princess. I didn't get a lot of video games when I was real little. I'd get 1 or 2, and then, I wasn't real little then. I was in middle school, but we couldn't afford a lot of that stuff. So when I started getting older, like when the GameCube came out, I was able to get more games. I think at that point too, my little brother was starting to play things, so we could kind of pool our resources, which helped. Yeah, so I think I've only played like 2 Zelda games ever. But when I was growing up, it wasn't uncommon to go watch a friend play a game. I sat in friends' basements and watched them play Final Fantasy and Majora's Mask and things like that. Twisted Metal. Maybe Metal Gear, too. I don't remember. So if you couldn't afford the game, you just went over to your friend's house who had the game, and you would either play it there or you'd watch them play it. And spent a lot of time sitting on a sketchbook and watching my friends play video games. Not a bad way to exist. Not at all. I thought there was a chance that I was going to finish this drawing during this session. Unless this session goes for like 3 hours, I don't think there's any way that's happening. I feel like I have ever so slightly greater understanding of what's happening in this piece now. And I mean that literally. Like, I have ever so slightly a better understanding of what's happening. Wrong brown. Still not quite the brown I was looking for, but we're going with it. I wonder if I should do some of these sketchbook session kind of things with digital art. I guess would it really be a sketchbook session? It'd be more like a digital art session. Would any of you be interested in that? If I did some digital art and was just talking about, kind of doing the same rambly things I'm doing here as I was working through it. If so, just let me know, because I'd be happy to do it. I tend to record most of what I do digitally, so it would be really easy to just make sure I have the microphone ready to go too. So yeah, let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. Where's that dark green? There it is. I'm getting a little bit more of these background areas kind of taken care of and complete here. Oh, you know what? Before I do, I'm going to go circle out some more of these leaves because I can actually work. Almost like I went to the bottom of this piece for a reason, and that was to let some of these upper portions dry a little bit. Now that they are, I can come back in and create some of what I wanted to create earlier. Get some borders on these leaves, which makes it easier later to not accidentally go over them or go over too much of the edge. I'm very excited that all of my flowers outside have slowly started to come up and come through the earth. I don't remember everything that was planted the last couple years. Things have been a little intense, but I know that there's a lot of lilies, and I think some of the old tulips and the daffodils in the front porch. It just makes me so happy. Spring is just such a wonderful thing. I think it's probably my favorite season of the year, though I feel very fortunate too to live in Colorado where we actually have 3 seasons. This winter has been kind of brutal though. We had more snow and more cold than I remember in the last 15 or 20 years. And I like the snow. I like waking up and you've got a whole bunch of snow outside. But man, it was just a lot. So I'm very happy to see green things coming up in the backyard. I got my daughter's sandbox put together last week, so we're very excited to get some sand brought in for that so that she can play out in the backyard while I'm hanging out in the garden. At some point I'll probably take just a little tour. I do have plans of doing a studio tour so everyone listening can see the place that I work and how I have things set up. Not because I'm so special, but just because I know that a lot of people do that, and I certainly enjoy seeing and understanding like the workspace that other people do utilize. And I think it can sometimes be really beneficial to see how people organize things and how they have things distributed, because I always feel like I don't have enough studio space, even though I've got a dedicated room for my studio, which is more than a lot of people have, and I'm very thankful for that. But I always feel like I need more space, and so sometimes it can be really beneficial to look at how other people are solving their space issues. So at some point I'll probably do a studio tour and show you all my place. I am not sure if I'll clean. There's a part of me that's like, I want to clean so that it doesn't look like I live in a pigsty. At the same time, it might actually be more genuine for everyone to see, like, nope, this is actually what it looks like when I'm working. So maybe I'll do both. Maybe I'll do like not clean at all and do a little video tour of it and then clean it, maybe that same day or a couple days later. Like, this is what it looks like when it's all put together and it's cleaned. But yeah, I think that might be the best option, because there's an authenticity to, like, this is what my studio looks like most of the time. And I don't want people to feel bad about the fact that their studio spaces are dirty, because I think they all are. Like, on this desk right now, like, most of what you're seeing is just this sketchbook, and this desk is not too bad, but it's cluttered. It's very cluttered. There's containers of paintbrushes. There's all my brush pens. There's my regular pens. There's all kinds of stuff on it. On the floor behind me, there's like headphones, an old coffee can, 2 rulers, a stack of sketchbooks, my video capture card box for the ability to record what we're watching right now. So I can be a really tidy person. I'm just not always. All right. I think that's where we're closing out the session. So thank you for listening. Thanks for hanging out and watching. I really appreciate it. I would love if you would share what you were working on while you were paying attention, while you were listening today. Any comments would be fantastic. If you liked it, please feel free to like the video if you're enjoying this. I would really appreciate a subscribe. No pressure, but if you're enjoying this and you'd like to be notified when my videos go live, I would appreciate it a lot. And it does help out. So anyway, I hope you guys all have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you can find little teeny pockets of joy in whatever you're doing today. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.